Now, we've been working over lunch with our legal team, and hopefully we've come up with solutions that will strike the right balance between all your various views and comments. I know that some of you have come up with specific suggestions in terms of wording, and you can imagine that all the input doesn't necessarily agree one with the other. So what we've tried to do is to come up with wording that we believe represents a fair compromise and that I hope you can support. Now, before we go into explaining all of that, I want to apologise to Group 9. I'm sorry, in my enthusiasm, I didn't call on you to report, but we have been in touch with you over lunch and we've got your questions and we've fed them back into the discussion, but please accept my apologies. I'll try not to miss anybody out again. So let's now take you through what we would like to suggest for your consideration. Just before lunch, we had the additional poll, and 71% of you expressed a preference to introduce an option B with a stronger obligation on the state. That means that 29% of you didn't favour that option for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe they were concerned over the potential costs or the degree of obligation. And if your preference is to stay at the level of principle, you can then vote for option A in April. We've also made some very small changes to option A that I'll explain in a moment. But what we have now come up with is the following. And if we could put the wording up on the screen, please, Lena, I think, and then leave it there. People will have time to think about it while I take you through it. So first of all, to explain what we are suggesting to do in option A. Some of you were wondering, what does the word share, when we have the principle of valuing and we had sharing care in the version that we were discussing earlier on. We're proposing to take out the word sharing because it was causing confusion, and instead to replace it with the word supporting. And the reason for this is that the word supporting recognizes that carers don't just need recognition, but they also need support. It's still more of a symbolic recognition of the need for support, and it would not place an actionable commitment on the state to provide it. We've also suggested to put in the words within the home and the wider community, again, based on your feedback, so that if you choose option A, you would be also expressing your wish to give recognition to care beyond the family. So those are just two small changes that we would suggest to option A. Now then option B, as you see, we have we have revised quite a lot, and we have also added the words within the home and the community. So that would be the same in both options. But the big change to option B is now that the word oblige is much stronger than the previous language in option B. And you might be interested to know that the phrase reasonable measures to support care actually comes from the Constitution of South Africa, and it's seen as a model of good practice in the area. It would allow the courts to review the reasonableness of government policy, but the courts would not be able to make policy themselves. But what they could do, if they felt the government was not respecting this kind of an obligation, then they would send the government back to the drawing board. So this revised version of option B would give you the option to signal that you want to place a stronger obligation on the state. Maybe just again to point out that if you feel that's too strong, you shouldn't necessarily vote now in our poll. This is just to give an option to members who want that in the final vote in April, but you would still have the option to vote for option A in April if you believe that option B is too strong. So what I would now suggest is take a minute or two to think about it. I hope that you will recognize that we have made a lot of effort to try to marry up all the different contributions that you made during the morning. Maybe it's not as you would write it, but I do think that now we have two options which really do reflect the views that you have expressed. And I hope that in the spirit of compromise that I was asking you to show earlier on, that you would feel happy now to go ahead and choose whether these are the two options that should be on the ballot paper in April. If anybody has a really particular problem, maybe type your name in the chat function and I'll give you the floor very briefly. But we do have to be mindful of time. I think that we do also, we can't now have a repeat of the discussion we had this morning, but just if anybody has any really major problems with the way in which we've presented the alternatives and interpreted what you're telling us you want, maybe just very quickly signal that, and then in a couple of minutes I'll ask you to actually choose on these. All right, well look, having had the chance now to think about that and to weigh it up in the light of the discussion that we had this morning, could we now ask you to indicate via the Zoom poll whether you agree that question 2, as you now see it, the revised version of question 2, that should appear on the ballot paper in April. So the poll question will come up now, and like you've done already today, we'll ask you to choose between yes or no. So let's see what the outcome is. Oh my goodness, I think that's very convincing. Well, look, thanks very much. And in particular, what I'm very happy about is that it's your input that has shaped the questions. As I keep saying, the Secretariat and I are here to facilitate your work, but you are the people who are making the decisions. And I think you've just proved that again by refining and elaborating and making more clear your choices. And that's really what this is all about. So we will move on now from that. One thing I would like to say is that on the whole question of care and caring, a lot of more detailed questions came up, and we'll come back to those when we're looking at other recommendations you will be deciding on in March and April. So today we're just trying to settle the question of what you will vote on as regards changing the Constitution in April. Then we'll move on to a lot of other questions about caring when we look at the other recommendations that you'll be making. So again, thank you all very much, including for your willingness to accommodate each other's points of view and work with us to try to get the outcome as clear and as reflective as possible of the overall mood and wishes of the Assembly. So I think it's been a very good start in our work, and I appreciate that. We will now put you back in your breakout groups for the last time today. You'll have around 50 minutes and you're going to be discussing questions 3 and 4. The same rules as before. You're not answering the questions today. Today you're telling us whether you feel these are the right questions. These are the questions that should be on the ballot paper in April. And remember that in April you will only vote on question 4 if a majority indicates yes to question 3. And if this happens, then we will need now to agree on question 4, which will be the follow on if the majority vote yes to question 3. So I hope that's clear. And we will see you back again at about 25 to 3. And as last time, when you come back, I will check with the facilitators if there are any questions or any issues arising from your discussions. But if you have questions that pop up in your group, like you did this morning, please email them to us through the question responder in your group, and we'll try to answer detailed questions as much as possible. If there are 1 or 2 questions that are coming up across the groups, then I'll address them when you come back in plenary at 25 to 3.